Hey guys, welcome back to another Math Tutoring to Go IM1 video. Today we're going to be talking about solving equations, particularly literal equations. And literal equations are equations where you substitute all of your numerical values with letters or variables. So when a problem is asking for the solution for one variable, then you just isolate that variable using just the letters that are given to you. So let's get into it. Okay, so before we get into examples, we're just going to talk about some basic math ideas that you might need to know before you get into solving literal equations. So one of these very basic math ideas is PEMDAS, which explains the order of operations that you use when solving for equations. So PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. And it's important to note that this is the order, when you're looking at an equation, this is the order in which you would complete things. So if you have a set of numbers inside parentheses and all of the things in parentheses are multiplied by another number, you would solve for what's in the parentheses before multiplying everything that's in the parentheses. It's also important to remember that multiplication and division are kind of interchangeable in this order. So if division were to come first in the equation, then you would do division first. But if multiplication were to come first in the equation, you would start with multiplication and then do division. It's just dependent on what comes first in the equation. It doesn't necessarily have to happen in the order that's written here in PEMDAS. And the same applies to addition and subtraction. So it's important to remember this concept because I'm sure you know that this applies to equations, but this also applies to literal equations, although it might get confusing when you're looking at a bunch of variables and letters. So let's get into some examples so we can explain this. Okay, so we're going to start off with a fairly simple example. So if we're looking at this equation, g equals 6x, we can see that we have two variables. So at first you might be a little bit confused as to how to solve for this, but when we're looking at literal equations, you don't necessarily need the variable that you're solving for to equal just a single number. It can equal a combination, like a whole expression of different variables and numbers, as long as your variable that you're solving for is isolated. So when we're looking at this, we have to figure out how to isolate x. Well, this is fairly simple, so if I rewrite it here, right, g equals 6x, and since x is multiplied by 6, we can isolate x by simply dividing the whole equation by 6. That would give us g over 6 equals x. Okay, so for our second problem, we're going to look at something that might look a little bit more complicated just because there's some more things going on in this equation, but really we would solve it just as we would any other equation. So if we're looking at this, we can start by rewriting the equation. So we have negative 3x plus 2c equals negative 3. This is atrocious handwriting, sorry guys. Okay, so we can begin by isolating our term with x. That's a good place to start, so then we can go from there. So we can isolate this term right here by subtracting 2c from both sides. So if we subtract 2c, that's going to give us negative 3x equals negative 3 minus 2c. But now we still have this negative 3 in front of the x, so in order to isolate x, we're going to divide the whole thing by negative 3. So that's going to give us x equals negative 3 minus 2c over negative 3. However, you can and probably should further simplify this equation by taking out the negative here, because there's a negative both on the numerator and the denominator. Those would cancel out, giving you x equals 3 plus 2c over 3. So that would be your final and the correct answer. Okay, so for our final example, we're going to look at an equation that looks just a little bit different, because this equation says solve g equals 4ca minus 3ba 4a. But as you can see, a appears twice in our equation, so you may be wondering, how would I solve for a if it appears twice? Well, it's actually fairly simple, because we can use our distribution property to see that we can remove a from this equation, take it out, and then parentheses we can write 4c minus 3b. And we know this is correct because if we were to distribute A over what's in parentheses, that would give us 4CA minus 3BA, which would be exactly the same as what we have up here. So in order to isolate A, all we have to do is divide everything in the equation by 4C minus 3B. So then that's going to give us G over 4C minus 3B equals A. And that's all you have to do. Okay, so that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please stay tuned for future Math Tutoring to Go Integrated Math 1 videos, and let us know if you have any topics that you'd like for us to cover, whether that's in Integrated Math 1 or any of the other math classes.